You could totally build a website with any of these other inexpensive, I guess you could say, options. But then you end up with obituaries that aren't engaging. You've got a guest book that looks like a blog post. It's just not going to get you the engagement you need. You're not getting the funeral home specific features that all of the website providers in the space will try and do.
Welcome to FD Talks, the forward-thinking podcast created to help funeral professionals run their business and serve families. Join us as we discover important funeral and death care topics. Gain incredible, dependable, and valuable information to help your business succeed in a rapidly changing environment. Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for another episode of FD Talks as we dive into the topic of funeral home websites. I'm Rob Davidson, and you probably have heard that it's important for your funeral home to have a website, but today we're going to talk about why that is. How can a quality custom website help you connect with families and improve your service to the community? Or is a unique website even worth the investment? We're going to cover all of that today and more in part one of this two-part series. My guests today come to us right from the front lines of funeral home and funeral service marketing. First off, we have Drew Seal. He's back again. Drew is the EVP and Chief Marketing Officer for Funeral Directors Life. And Drew, kind of tell us a little bit about your role at FD.
Yeah, Rob, thanks for having me, and I appreciate being here with you and Curtis as well. And so for me, as far as my background is concerned, my grandpa started Funeral Directors Life with him and three of his funeral home buddies back in 1981, and then my dad got on board about 1985 and has been here ever since. And then for myself professionally, I got on board as a sales professional in the Waco, Central Texas area back in 2014. And then as I worked up the ranks a little bit in the company, I became our Chief Marketing Officer back in April of 2022. And what I do now is I really help our brand marketing team as well as our marketing team that works directly with our funeral home clients to help them market in their own communities. And so I oversee both of those areas.
Very good. And we also have today, as you mentioned, Curtis Funk, who's the CEO of Tukios. And Curtis, tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm founder of Tukios. We're a software company. We build software and products to try and enhance funerals in general. And so that includes websites, video creation, some aftercare tools, lead generation. There's just a lot this has become, but just, at the core, it's really like a website platform with a bunch of widgets and the video software that we've really been known for. Tukio started as a video creation tool. I stumbled into the funeral industry over 20 years ago, like 1999, went to my first funeral, and my family's super entrepreneurial, and that turned into an idea for a little side hustle to start recording funerals, and that recording funerals turned into live streaming. That was all done under a different brand called funeralrecording.com, and then just recognized there was an opportunity for video creation and built Tukios. And there's a lot we could go into with all the history if we wanted to. It's not important, but so here we are. Tukio has been in business for almost 14 years, and we work with thousands of funeral homes all over the place.
Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about websites, and I was as I was preparing for our program, I was thinking, it doesn't seem like a brand new thing to be talking about. Based on both of your experiences, and Drew, I'll ask you first, why do you think it's important for every funeral home just to have a high quality and informative website?
It's funny you mentioned how websites have been around for a while, but what we've seen in the funeral profession is that the funeral profession itself has been lagging, or always lags, with technology. And so probably around 10 years as far as a lag is concerned. So we're able to see some trends that happen in other industries before it actually hits the funeral profession. And based on that, and just based on where we see funeral home websites currently, it's super important to have this digital reputation out there. And it doesn't seem like a lot of funeral homes are taking that seriously as much as we would want them to. Pretty much, if you think about your website, that's going to be your first impression that you have with most consumers out there, is being able to have a strong, reputable presence digitally. You have probably 10 times more people are going to be visiting your website than are actually going to be visiting your actual physical location. And it's amazing how many funeral home websites we look at. They just don't invest very much into the pretty much digital storefront that they have with consumers. But if you were to look at their physical storefront, they spend a lot of time trying to make sure that that first impression when they walk in the door physically actually makes a very good first impression for the consumers. And it's interesting to see that most funeral home websites just don't have that type of mentality with their website as they do with their physical storefront.
Yeah. Curtis, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think I would absolutely echo the same thought that it's your new front door, right? I mean, that's just consumers today. That's where they're going to go first. We do find that an interesting statistic is that people don't really shop a lot of funeral homes. So they're going to come to your website, so it's important to be top of mind. Number one, they're probably not going to go search every single website in the town, but when they do, you need to make sure that you're ready for that. And I think just one other thought to answer that question is, and really kind of piggyback on what Drew said, is there's just an enormous opportunity to build that audience from people that are visiting your website and try to intentionally collect data from them, get them to subscribe to your content, specifically your obituaries, because people are coming to your website, 80% of them or more. It's typically closer to 85% are what we call mourners. They are coming to look and find an obituary or a service. And the remaining 15 to 20% are, shoppers and planners, more shoppers than planners, but not by much. And so when you're thinking about that, there's really they're looking for something to click on. They're not coming to your website for any other reason than for you to guide them in what they should do next. And so, making sure your obituaries and all that are front and center is important. Making sure that they can, find what they need to find from a shopping perspective, if that's pricing and whatnot, but just making it accessible and understanding that if you're asking them for something, you're not being too salesy or too pushy. That's what they're looking for, right? They want to engage. And so I think that's one of the things where we see that where there's kind of maybe a little bit of a miss where we could dive in deeper, is just trying to, intentionally build your audience and turn your shoppers and your planners into leads and your mourners into a community that you can continue to engage with.
Yeah, well, do you ever find that maybe there's a lack of education for some funeral homes, that they don't really understand that those two, their actual storefront and their digital storefront, their website, could actually be working together to help them? Are they get confused about that? Almost as if they were competing against each other?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could see it that way. And I also think there's a huge opportunity where it's a lot less expensive to renovate your website than it is to renovate your building, right? And if you think of just the public perception of funerals in general, they don't know what to expect. They don't know what to expect from your building. They don't know what it's going to, a lot of people, if they haven't been in there, they might be nervous. What's it going to look like? Is it going to be scary? They just don't know. And then if they are shopping between buildings, you've got a really great opportunity to change that perception. And maybe you might have a funeral home that's older and maybe a little bit dark and you haven't had a chance to renovate it, but your website can put off a really, welcoming and positive, vibe. And hopefully that's, one way to bring them in. And so, yeah, I think you look at it as another location, you've got your physical location. If you've only got one rooftop, look at your website as another location and try to make it as clean and modern and welcoming and inviting as possible.
So I guess my next question would be, and I'll start with you, Drew, what impact would a website that's not lead generating or informative have on a funeral home's business?
I think it can have a strong negative impact on the funeral home's business as a whole, and the value that consumers are going to see in their business as a whole. If you don't have a website that's going to be informative, simple to navigate, and then provide ways for consumers to, navigate that and have calls to actions to get them to where they need to be, then they're going to move on to somewhere else. And all that means is you're losing a potential family that could have been going to your funeral home, and it may go to the competition across the street. It may go to a competitor that is online and only online, but they're in the market because that's where consumers are going to be going, is they're going to be Googling funeral homes in the area or who should I use if I'm thinking about planning ahead or whatever that may be, there's going to be multiple funeral homes and online funeral homes that are going to show up in that list. And if your website is not getting them to where they need to be or is not informative enough, they're just going to move on to the next person. And that, again, is going to negatively impact your market share and then negatively impact your business as a whole.
Yeah, I think, the impact it has, I want to focus more on the lead generating side, because I think like the impact it has, they may not notice the impact it's having on their business if they're not doing it now, right? They don't realize what they're missing out on, is what I'm getting at. But if you have a website that is generating leads, well, then you see like the opportunities this can create. And so, really the way that's done is it's simple stuff. Like it's something you see on every website you land on anywhere else. It's some sort of, content information you're providing to them, and in return, you're asking for their information, right? You've seen this with ebooks, you've seen this all, and a lot of honestly, like the ebooks and stuff are getting, we're seeing like maybe less interaction from those types of things now. But there's also, like events. I mean, you're holding events. Use those as lead generating opportunities. Make sure that information is on the website, and you'll see the impact that it is having. So again, like if they're not doing it now, if the website's not focused on trying to generate leads, they don't know what they're missing out on. So like, again, like they may not even notice the impact. But if you're doing it right, you will see those leads come in. It's amazing. People fill out forms. People they want what you have. They're there because they're interested. And if they're there at that moment and you put something in front of them that they can subscribe to or sign up for or download or whatever, they're going to do it. And you're going to get, a lead, and you're going to start building an audience that you're going to be able to market to.
And it's a trailing effect too. Like you're not going to, just like Curtis was talking about, if they don't know they're not getting leads yet, they don't know that future market share could come their way because they just didn't know that could happen. And then if there's families that were, loyal to them in the past, they have no idea if they would be coming back to them in the future, because if they don't have a lead generative website, they're not continuing to be in front of those families that maybe they once thought were loyal to them to be able to serve them in the future.
So how important, Curtis, do you think it is for a website to be visually appealing? Is that something that could be a turn off, or are there best practices for that you've found to be successful with funeral service marketing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and absolutely. And we've heard feedback from funeral homes that have told us, like, hey, we had someone come in and they said they looked at the websites in town and they came to us because our site was so clean. And the interesting thing is, like, one example I can think of specifically with this, I know all the funeral homes in that town, and they don't necessarily have the best building in town, right? But they earned the business because the site was just simple and clean. So I think that it's really important. When you're dealing with your own personal website and you're a family-owned business, you kind of want to make sure that you don't look like the other guy down the street. And so that ability to customize and set yourself apart, it's important.
Well, I think along those lines too, you also don't want to make yourself look like a real estate company or an automobile dealership. I mean, and so I guess that kind of begs the question why a funeral home ought to really consider working with a website provider that has the understanding of the funeral profession.
Oh, for sure. And this is an interesting thought too, because when we started Tukio's and it was all video creation, I used to get the question all the time inside and outside the industry that was like, well, why wouldn't we just use iMovie? Why wouldn't we just use Premiere Pro? Why wouldn't we just use, like any of these other video creation tools? And, our answer to funeral directors was always the same. It was like, use our system for free for 90 days. And if you can go back to using one of those quote unquote, like free platforms, do it. And that always won us business, because when you're a vendor and a supplier and you're building a product specifically for an industry, the way we do specifically for funeral directors only, like that's there. They can't compete. Like, so when you're thinking about a website, you could totally build a website with Squarespace or Wix or any of these other inexpensive, I guess you could say, options. But then you end up with like obituaries that aren't engaging. And the problem with that is that's 80-something% of your traffic. You've got a guest book that looks like a blog post. It's one of the reasons we're like not fans of like WordPress, right? Like WordPress is an excellent website platform, but for a funeral home, you know, like the obituary widgets and stuff like that, where your comments and your guest book is really just a comment section, you can tell this is just another blog website. Like, it's just not going to get you the engagement you need. That's why, you know, is like when you're working with one of these other providers, you're not getting the funeral home specific features that all of the website providers in the space, or at least most of us, will try and do, right? So there's, whether that's like, you know, obituary subscription, it's event management, it's like lead generation for pre-need, it's the AI obit writers, the AI guest book moderators, the location management for all of your locations and everywhere you hold services in your community, cemetery integrate. There's so many pieces to it, right? And so you're really just missing out on efficiencies. And that's what it really boils down to. If you think like, what is the difference? The difference is efficiency. Like, your business is going to operate better. Your employees are going to have a lot more time when they're working with an industry specific product that's built to simplify your life, right? The others, they're not thinking about funeral directors and admins inside of a funeral home and how they're interacting with the website. And so that's the big difference maker. And from a cost perspective, it's like, no, you're saving any money to go to any of like the, like, you know, bigger providers or whatever you want to say, the more consumer level providers. It's like, you're actually going to spend more money and you're going to spend more of your time. So it's just way more expensive than, you know, than it would be to just go the efficient route and work with an industry specific website platform.
It's incredibly important to have a website provider that has been in the funeral profession. I mean, at least in my opinion, because there's so many different acronyms, and the funeral industry or the funeral profession just has its own language, if you will, at times. And so when you have a company that already knows that language and knows how to talk about different topics with funeral home owners and admins and the staff, I mean, it just makes it so much more efficient, like Curtis was talking about, because you don't have to just go through and explain what an obituary is, or explain what pre-need is, or explain, you know, why it's important to have a digital guest book, or all those things. You know, when you're with a provider that already gets that and has been in the profession for 20 plus years, it makes all the difference in the world for that. And then I think to piggyback off of that, you also want to have the appropriate content on your website as well. So it's not just, I mean, it's very important to have a website provider that understands the profession. But then on top of that, being able to collaborate with a website provider that understands the importance of the content and the language that you have on your website is just as much important. Because if you don't have the right language on your website to either get people to where they need to go, or to explain the value of what the funeral profession is about and what, for instance, that funeral home is about in the right way, you could start to lose families to other areas because they just don't understand the value. And it may not be losing them to other areas, but you're missing out on an opportunity to give them the healing and meaningful funeral that family deserves.
How important is it to have engagement with those families?
I think when it comes to engagement, it's really just like you focus on the why, right? Why do you have the website? It's not just a brochure or a business card, right? It's because you're trying to build a community, you're trying to build an audience. And so when you're trying to improve engagement, of course, we've already talked about all the calls to action that need to exist on the website to build the audience. And then there's more that needs to be done once you have the people, right? Because like if you've built an audience, let's say you got 5,000 people subscribed to receiving your daily obituary updates or something, or you've got, you know, a couple hundred that have asked for more pre-need information. You've got these folks that have said, you know, it's okay to email me, right? And so having a plan, that's a whole nother conversation, right? That's where like FDL comes in, I think, when you're dealing like with a pre-need company in general, because they do such a great job, because there's you know, the incentives are aligned to get this engagement with this community and turn it into something. But the other thing that's just super important is your search engine optimization, your SEO. So most of the traffic, well, here's how we see it. We see about a third of the traffic of all the funeral home websites coming direct. They come directly to your site. And then a third are coming through what we call organic search. So they're Googling an obituary typically. There's a lot more Googling of names of obituaries than there is happening of like, Abilene Funeral Home, right? They're going to search that, and we want you to rank first, but it's really important for obituaries to rank first and to rank quickly, right? Because again, if somebody passes away, there's only a few days worth where this traffic is important. And so making sure that your website provider is optimizing that. The other third of traffic is coming from, kind of other sources, typically social media. And I think that could actually be even more than 50% if we were to break it down to funeral homes that use social media well, and they're posting their obituaries online. We've heard there's two different trains of thought there, or sides of the coin anyway, where it's like, you don't want to like overload your social media feed with just a bunch of obituaries. So you need to, have a lot of other content, but at the same time, it is driving a lot of traffic to the websites. And so that's really crucial. But also one more piece I would want to say surrounding SEO is, we're all at the mercy of Google and Bing and Apple and everything else at this point. And so you've all Googled, you've all searched, you've all seen that, when you search something, there's typically a sponsored result at the top, which is an ad. If you're searching an obituary, that doesn't happen as often. It'd be really weird for someone to be buying a keyword of someone's name with obituary. But if they are searching like in the community and they're looking for a funeral home in the community, that's where you'll see more of that sponsored search. But that's also where Google business listing is so crucial, right? It's very important for you to focus on reviews, try to get at least 5-star reviews, make sure you own your Google business listing, and that you keep it up to date. Make sure your phone number on Facebook and your phone number on Google, all those things are all in alignment, and that everything is where it should be, that your store hours are 24 hours a day, all that stuff. There's a lot, you need to put a lot of effort in that Google business listing if you haven't, because that 3-pack of what everyone's going to see as the top 3 funeral homes in the community shows up before the organic search results most times. Right. So that's just super important. If there's anything you can do on your end when it comes to SEO, if you're not working with like an SEO company, it's make sure you're keeping your Google business listing up to date. And then in terms of everything else, it's really on your website provider to make sure that, you are indexing quickly and the obits are showing up and the search results are happening and you're ranking number 1, because that's where a lot of your search is coming from.
Well, we definitely covered a lot of great tips and strategies today around making your website a powerful tool for your funeral home. Special thanks to Curtis and Drew for offering their thoughts and their expertise and giving us a lot to think about. So we'll actually have them back for another episode of FT Talks as we continue our discussion on why your website is such an important part of the success of your business. So be on the lookout for part 2 in this 2-part series. We hope this episode made you think a little bit more about your website and ask yourself how you can improve your service to families with your website. Thanks again for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time. If you would like more information about today's topic or previous discussions, please visit us online at funeraldirectorslife.com/FD Talks. There you can find information about this podcast and submit any comments, suggestions, or feedback about our series. We also welcome your ideas for future episodes. Listen to FD Talks wherever you get your podcasts.